The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, we're welcoming the Honorable Bill O'Brien, past Speaker of the House, who's running again for the House of Representatives. Bill, how are you doing? How's your campaign going?
Well, I signed up today. Today's the last day to sign up for state representative, and I'm stepped forward, and I'm going to be running in Ward 9, Carl. That's the ward that sort of is one side of Spitbrook Road, then going down to East Dunstable, the New Searle school area. So that's and then going towards Hollis. That's pretty much the footprint of Ward 9.
Mm-hmm. So how's the campaign going, though? Is your organization all put together? And I know you've been out actively visiting people.
Yeah, no, it is going well. You know, we had a great sign-up today. I went over with former Majority Leader Pete Silva, and we had a newcomer to the political scene, to the Nashua political scene, by the name of Ryan Terrell, came with us. And Ryan is signing up as a candidate in Ward 4, which is pretty much a downtown district, and Pete Silva is signed up for state representative in Ward 8, which, as you would suspect, is next to Ward 9. It's on the other side of East Dunstable Road, pretty much that neighborhood up through there.
Uh-huh.
And I want to make sure that your viewers, Carl, know who Ryan Terrell is. And they might have heard about him because he was nominated by Governor Sununu for a position on the State Board of Education. And he's a young man, 29 years old, an accomplished man. He grew up in New Orleans, came to New Hampshire to attend SNHU, Southern New Hampshire University, and he has grown to be quite respected by the business people he works with, and he earned that nomination. The nomination came up on Wednesday, a couple of days ago, for a vote before the Executive Council. And the Executive Council rejected him on party lines. And here's where it gets to be, I have to use the word, Carl, disgusting, because Executive Council of Delinsky referred to Ryan's race. He's an African American, and said it was tokenism. It was quite racially charged. And Nashua's own Executive Council, Deborah Pignatelli, joined with Councilor Valinsky in disparaging this young man, saying he wasn't qualified to be on the board. And, you know, it's so far from the truth. But this is New Hampshire. We don't engage in racially charged language in talking about our fellow Granite Staters. And to say that this man isn't qualified, he's set up educational programs at his company. He has a degree in integrated studies. He's conducted himself with honor throughout his whole life. And again, to say he's not qualified, the State Board of Education has 2 designated high school members on the board. So it's extraordinary that we would see this kind of racism come forward. It was stated on the 56th anniversary of the end of the Democrat Senate filibuster of the Civil Rights Bill of 1964. We would hope that this kind of rhetoric was behind us, but Here, the Democrats have raised it again in New Hampshire, and I'm so disappointed.
Well, the executive board's been making decisions like that quite a bit. They weren't most specific in why he didn't have the qualifications. I mean, he's a graduate of the university, our university here in New Hampshire, and he works for a company and has a responsible position. I don't know. 29 isn't that young. He should have some experience to be able to serve them. And God knows they need people with business experience up there in the education department.
Well, one of the things that was shocking when I said that Deborah Pignatelli joined with the Councilor Walensky in his racist remarks is during the hearing, she said, now, I have to tell you that Ryan Terrell doesn't wear the mantle of victimhood. He at this point is not saying he's a victim of racism, but Councilor Pignatelli, in saying, well, I'm not going to vote for you because I have 3 other African-American candidates that I could bring forward. Who would bring that up? First of all, she didn't bring them forward. There was just one nomination. And let me tell you what Deborah Pignatelli knew about this position. Ryan went and talked individually to each of the executive counselors before the hearing came up. When he spoke with Deborah Pignatelli, he was saying, I've been recommended by Drew Klein. Now, Drew Klein is chairman of the State Board of Education. Right. Mm-hmm. She asked, who's that? She said her remark to Ryan was, who's that? And then when Ryan explained, well, Madam Counsel, that's the chairman of the board. Her immediate next statement was, oh, so you're just doing the bidding of Drew Klein then? Immediately went from, I don't know who the man is, to I know the thoughts that go through his head. It is this partisanship has to end. It's one of the reasons I'm running, is that I want to represent, as I think most of the Ryan Terrell and Pete Silver and most of all of the Republican candidates come forward. We want to represent New Hampshire traditions of inclusion. We want to strive for what is the national model. And you know it, Carl, it's e pluribus unum, that Latin phrase simply means among many, one. What has happened to that? Why do they have to continue to divide us?
Well, in the particular executive board, it seems, has had several incidences that shows that it's just purely political. And now they're saying they should make the exception. They're supposed to approve whatever the governor suggests. They're not the ones that suggest who to appoint to these positions. So they sort of got their job reversed. I couldn't understand that.
They do. Yeah, they do. I mean, Councilor Pignatelli could have brought forward to Governor Sununu saying, I have some candidates. And she didn't do that. Look what else they've done, in their actions. I'm not running for councilor, but it's shocking and emblematic of what's going on in state politics now. Eddie Edwards, again, an African-American, as if this should be important, but he was nominated as Director of Licensing in New Hampshire. By Governor Sununu. He's the former director of enforcement for the Liquor Commission. He's a former congressional candidate who requitted himself well during, again, a lot of respect during that race. They are opposing him as well. Gordon MacDonald was nominated as Chief Justice. Our court has 5 justices. Now it only has 4 because they rejected him on party line basis, even though he was supported by over a dozen of the former presidents of the New Hampshire Bar Association, former members of the New Hampshire Supreme Court came forward and saying this is an exceptional candidate. And he's our Attorney General now, and they rejected him on party line votes. We have to stop this partisanship. We've seen it at the council level. We've seen it in the State House or the House of Representatives, Senate. Look what happened this past week in the House of Representatives. Republicans wanted to bring forward a bill before we close out the session that would take the Democrat payroll tax increase upcoming this January 1st. It's going to be a 12.5% payroll tax increase because it was triggered by bad times. So a tax increase is triggered by bad times, and they wouldn't even let the bill come forward. They voted on party lines to even refuse to consider the bill. We have to stop that.
Well, I think that we're seeing that it is out of control. The legislation got one bill passed yesterday on this special, I guess, what would you call it, special session over at the University of New Hampshire. And that was to sell beer by the growlers. And that seems like a big thing, right? That's the only bill they could get passed. So they just want to control that stuff.
Well, what happened when the health crisis started is the House passed a rule saying, we know we're not going to be able to get together. We know we're going to be going into a session a few months down the road, likely, and that there's certain deadlines that have to be met. We'll agree to waive those deadlines as long as the two-party leaders and their leadership teams confer with each other. At that point, effectively, the Democrats, who are in the majority this time, stopped talking to the Republicans and just decided we're going to ram through our whole agenda. We're going to use this crisis, as has been said by some of their national party leaders. We're going to take advantage of this crisis. And at that point, the Republicans could either say, we agree with your agenda, or say, what happened to discussion? Another example of the current dysfunction within the Democrat-controlled House of Representatives. Look, Carl, we have some, you know it as well as I do, and I'm sure a lot of your viewers do. We have some important issues coming up. We have a substantial amount of unemployment in New Hampshire that's fallen out of this healthcare crisis. We have a state budget that's going to be way out of kilter, both in closing out the current budget and then putting together a budget for in next January for the next biennium, next 2 years. And at this point, we can't be raising taxes on people. We have to right-size government to come within our means of affording government. The same thing that you and I and so many others did about 8 years ago when there was $1 billion, roughly $1 billion deficit. We closed it with not increasing any taxes. As a matter of fact, we reduced it 12 different taxes. Have to, and I would suggest it to you viewers, they have to get a team up there, a team coming out of Nashua, who's going to make sure the state doesn't spend more money than it has, doesn't increase taxes, has a government that we can afford.
I think you're right, Bill, and we have to get back to that same business type approach. You only get so much money coming in, you can only spend so much money. And well,
that's right.
Yeah. I mean, they have some big bills that they, like the 10-year road plan, for Pete's sakes. That hasn't been approved yet, has it?
No, it hasn't. No, there's a lot of things that haven't been done up there. They've failed us by not engaging in bipartisan discussions, not going to all of the reps and saying, let's talk about it. What good ideas do you have? I'll tell you some things I think are good ideas, and fashioning out legislation that can move New Hampshire forward. They instead said, we want our way or no way.
That's right.
And
their way is kind of sneaky in a way, I think. I understand that some of the bills that were submitted and essentially didn't get passed yesterday were that they had 2 or 3 things that didn't even resemble the basic idea of the bill. They just threw anything in there to try to get something that they know wouldn't pass by itself or get vetoed by the governor, who's done how many vetoes so far?
I wish I remember the numbers in the 60s. As you know, again, Carl, and I hope a lot of your viewers know, or if not, let me tell them. New Hampshire legislature has a great tradition. It differs substantially from Congress in a number of ways, but one important ways, which is we have bills that are limited to a single subject. We have bills that any one of us, the day before a voting session, can take out the bills and read through them and understand, okay, this is what they're trying to do. Unlike, 2,100-page Obamacare bills,
right,
which no one has any idea what it's doing. We have single-subject bills. They departed from this. They put these bills together of scores of pages with all sorts of different subjects. And then they went and said to the Republicans, take it or leave it.
mm-hmm.
And that's not the name. It
No.
really isn't. At that point, there's all kinds of funny business.
Well, I think it's coming back to bite them, too. Just here in Nashua, I'm reading in today's paper where the mayor has a little problem with his budget now because the state budget has them paying an extra $10 million on the pension plan. And firemen haven't had a raise since a year ago. That their supposedly recommendation can't be funded because it just doesn't fit into the mayor's budget. I mean, it's just like the state. The mayor, the city is falling back on income. Because of all the results of the virus problem. And so they have to
I worry about my...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Carl, I worry about my city, and I think a lot of us in New Hampshire worry about the towns and cities we live in because particularly in Nashua, we have so many parcels of commercial use, and you're seeing some of these businesses go out and particularly the big mall is losing anchor tenants and all, and they're going to be coming back looking for an abatement or reassessment, or Lord only knows, we could end up having some of the property owners who just become unable to pay their property bills. It's a time to be fiscally responsible. It's a time for state representatives in Concord from Nashua and from across the strait to say, we got to protect it. Well, it's not the fault of the towns and the cities that right. They are in rates. We got to protect them, which means we have to be fiscally responsible at the state level. We will require the cities and towns to be fiscally responsible, but we have to help them out. You can't have firefighters being unpaid. You can't have police wondering whether their pensions are going to be paid. We have to be fiscally responsible.
Right. Well, Bill, how about some of the things that you'd like to introduce if you get elected? What would you like to
I
see?
think along with the budget, I think we really have a lot of work to do in the budget. We have to turn to some of the issues we worked with, which is pension reform, make sure that we have a solvent pension system. The state pension system handles both state, county, and local right. employees. And it's our promise to those employees that they will be able to receive a pension. We don't want to see what is happening and likely to happen in Illinois and some of the bigger states where, actuarially, they're never going to pay these pensions. So we have to work on that. We have to look more closely at the statute passed in 2002 that Governor Sununu has been operating under for these past several months to conduct a lockdown. There's some of us who believe that it was a good thing. He identified the possibility of medical resources being overwhelmed, and he took concrete steps. We got a little bit uncomfortable as we saw that rationale be put aside in place of one that says to people, we're going to tell you how to protect yourselves. Right. We're going to tell you what you can do and can't do. That's not and it's for the best of motives that he did it, but it's not the New Hampshire way. The New Hampshire way is to say to people, we'll give you the information, we'll tell you, for example, that motorcycle helmets are something you should wear, but then you make a decision. You make a decision. I sure in the heck wouldn't get on a motorcycle without a helmet, but we tell people, make your decision, and now that we've given you all the facts. And so that was legislation passed in 2002 in the wake of 9/11, to September 11, 2001 attack on America. And I think there's going to have to be a much more automatic legislative involvement in that process, so that as people talk to their senators and talk to their representatives, the people that they can see at the store every day and see around the city, that they can take those folks' concerns and make sure they're being addressed, rather than, one individual perhaps only listen to public health officials who have a very narrow and legitimate concern, and not listen to, as folks are saying, you're destroying jobs, or folks saying you're setting a bad example for people taking care of themselves. So I fully intend, if we get up there, to do all I can so we can have a fresh look at that, make sure the balance is correct.
And we can look at it from a more positive direction, too. We saw how we were able to do it back there in 2011-12. It can be done. We can live within our means, and we can be proud and more optimistic about the future. I think rather than look at all the woe is me and why can't we do this and why can't we spend money for that, it's, hey, we can survive, we can do it, and we can advance, and the people will get to have a better environment to live in.
When I was Speaker and we were putting together the budget, we asked a single question, three-part question. One is, what is required that we do? Let's make sure we do it, make sure it's funded. What is good to do, but maybe we can cut it back? And what are those things that government shouldn't be doing? When we came to that last category, what we said is, we're not going to walk away from commitments that have been made. We're not going to say to folks, go cold turkey. We're not going to fund you. But we are going to say a goal saying, we're not going to be involved in that. We ended up reducing the budget by about $1 billion. The rhetoric, as you remember, was harsh. As Speaker, I was called everything under the sun but something good, and they said we're going to effectively find grandma on the snowbank fine out in spring.
Oh yeah.
And yet I would suggest to your viewers, I would suggest to those folks I'm going to be talking about this to in Ward 9, that they didn't notice anything bad happen. What they didn't notice is like Sherlock Holmes, the dog that didn't bark in the middle of the night. What they didn't notice was new taxes. What they saw is tax reductions that went through the future budgets, because we've been able to reduce New Hampshire business taxes from being among the top 10 in the country. I think at one point we were in the top 3 business tax, not personal, and we brought it down to below the median. Most importantly, below Massachusetts, Maine, and Vermont. We have a strong economy. We can't walk away from that. Those folks that are going to be looking for jobs need to know they're going to be there and get those strong economy.
Well, and also, Bill, every year that we had the reduction, we brought in more money than we had projected. And we were still ahead of projections until the virus came along this time. And if it wasn't for that, we would have, again, not initiated the tax increase that was built into the program, because we're not bringing in the money because we couldn't have people working. And that's you can't take something that is a result of some unknown thing that hurt the income, and then punish us more by increasing the tax rate.
You know, and folks seemingly are surprised and again by that phenomenon that you mentioned, that as you reduce taxes, more tax revenues come in. It was shown in the Calvin Coolidge administration at the beginning of the 1920s. John Kennedy, the tax cuts that he threw, President Kennedy, revenues increased. Ronald Reagan, revenues increased. When we did it, revenues increased. You know, I go back to my something that I really enjoy, which is reading history, and I was reading about Calvin Coolidge and his Secretary Treasurer is Andrew Mellon, and their biggest concern is every year they come together to figure out where can we avoid spending. Their biggest concern is that tax revenues would, as a result, accelerate to the point where Congress would want to start spending it again rather than returning it to the people. You know, we did have that happen in New Hampshire. We have to recapture it. The fact that this virus happened doesn't in any way mean that we should stop our effort to make sure New Hampshire achieves the role it's always played in New England, which is the most dynamic economy, one that supports liberty of its citizens, treats its citizens as just that, citizens, not subject, and assumes that they can make decisions for themselves.
And we're willing to do it on a bipartisan, but we have to work together. We have to, and it just isn't working out the way the party is working today. So I hope.
It's the arrogance of people thinking that they're the repository of all knowledge. You know,
right.
They aren't. You know, I want to reach across the aisle to Democrats and say, what good do you have to tell us? And let's get this going. And we need a majority, and unfortunately, a Republican majority who's going to do that rather than the current Democrat majority, which is saying our way or the highway.
Right. Well, thanks a lot, Bill. I think we've run out of time, and we'll be talking to you again as we go along this campaign, and good luck.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on, Carl, and thank all your viewers for listening to us.
Okay.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.